School of Management Studies IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC-007 Business Communication for MBA program. Presenting Block 4 Communication in Organization, Unit-14 Cross-Cultural Communication, Part-2. In Part 1, we have discussed Introduction, Characteristics of Culture, Theories of Culture, Cross-Cultural Communication, Hofstede's Cultural Dimension Model. In Part 2, we will discuss Hall's Cultural Model, Cross-Cultural Communication Barriers, Overcoming Cross-Cultural Communication Barriers, Lean Media, Rich Media and Social Media. Summary of the unit. Let us listen to the program.
Hall's Cultural Model. Edward T. Hall is known for his contribution to the understanding of cultures. He coined the term intercultural communication and suggested that in different cultures, individuals use different means to communicate, which may range from using just words to using body language, touch behavior, and also para-verbal communication. He has classified the analysis and interpretation of how communication and interactions take place between cultures under three categories, that is, context, space, and time. Let us discuss these in details for a better understanding. Context. The context refers to how a message is communicated. In a high context culture, the most important part of the message is the physical context. This means that message is expected to be interpreted in the same context in which it is crafted. Extensive care is taken at both the sender's and receiver's end in creating and interpreting the message. Body language accompanying the message plays a crucial role and sometimes may be even more important than words. High context communication using hand and arm gestures is more prevalent in Latin America, Asian and African cultures. United States and Northern European countries exhibit a low context culture where the message is constructed as it is meant. The message is direct and clear, reducing no scope for misunderstanding. The message is straight and precise without any adornments or unnecessary formalities. Challenges occur when individuals from high context cultures communicate with those from low context cultures. The low context culture people may miss on the important contexts provided by the body language along with the specific message and reduce the comprehensibility of the message. Largely, Asian countries lay less trust in words, more on context, while European and other English-speaking countries lay more emphasis on specific words and details. Space. Hall refers to space as the study of physical space and people, which is termed technically as proxemics. It refers to the distance between the people who are communicating. Americans prefer to stand apart while communicating in workplace settings as compared to individuals from Spain and Philippines where people prefer to stand closer. This trait basically indicates how much one is ready to share their space with others in different settings. Communication becomes effective when the comfort zone is not intruded. Time. Cultures also differ on the basis of how they handle time. In polychronic cultures, individuals indulge into multiple activities at the same time, whereas in monochronic culture, people tend to do one task at a time. Europeans and Americans of monochronic culture keep the scheduled time. All business meetings commence and end at the scheduled time. They strictly follow time even in informal settings. In case of any spillover of agenda points, another meeting is scheduled instead of extending the immediate meeting. Polychronic cultures, on the other hand, respect people and relationships over and above time. Time schedules are relaxed and they are flexible to overlap activities or stretch the activity beyond schedule. They prefer to finish the task at hand and can extend their time schedules to accommodate spillovers. Individuals from each of the cultures find it difficult or uncomfortable to switch to the other culture. Cross-cultural communication barriers. Observation and interpretation are distinct when viewed in reference to cross-cultural communication. Barriers in cross-cultural communication can be classified under 5 heads as given by Hofstede, and these are as follows. First, language barrier. Second, non-verbal communication. Third, stereotypes. Fourth, cultural bias. Fifth, anxiety. Now let us discuss each of these barriers one by one in detail. Language barrier. The knowledge of language is way more than just vocabulary and grammar. Your competence in language extends to acquiring the ability to know what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, how to frame it, and why or why need to say it. Shallow knowledge of language may prove to be harmful, especially in cases where one word could have multiple meanings when used in different situations. An ideal learner would want to learn the language from a native who knows in and out of the language per se and its applications. Non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication forms an inevitable co-partner of verbal communication. This includes gestures, posture, and demeanor, which elevates the language and sometimes replaces words. This unspoken language has become so much a part of us that we use it not just frequently but also habitually. During cross-cultural communication, it is best to observe non-verbal communication that is prevalent. One should be aware of those gestures or postures that may be natural to them but may be considered offensive in other cultures. For example, crossing of legs or pointing of index finger is treated as an insult in some cultures. It is best to reconfirm in case you are not sure of the meaning of any non-verbal communication of some other culture. Stereotypes. Stereotyping is preconceiving interpretations about people belonging to certain cultures. For example, if we assume that citizens of one country are aggressive and unfriendly, we will interpret all their verbal and non-verbal communication that way only. In order to remove these forms of stereotyping, take the individuals on his or her face value and judge them as individuals and not just as representatives of one culture. Even after being part of the same culture, they may have significantly different actions. Culture, being in a fluid state, may take different forms and may be represented differently. There will always be certain things that need to be interpreted outside the purview of culture. Relinquishing your set stereotypes and grasping afresh the cultural perspectives of another culture will help you acclimatize, appreciate, and apply them during cross-cultural communication. Cultural bias. This deals with the predisposition to assess behavior of individuals belonging to other cultures. There could be a propensity to assess behavior as good or bad. Cultural bias is an integral barrier of cross-cultural communication. We tend to compare amongst cultures, primarily our own culture. The ideal thing to do in such a situation is to remove all preconceived notions and become aware of the other culture. It is not appropriate to classify things, but to accept the way they are. Watching the culture from a distance and comprehending the bigger picture will help one remove cross-cultural barriers and assist in effective communication. Anxiety. While communicating with individuals of another culture, most people experience anxiety. The unfamiliar experience causes stress. This anxiety and stress mounts further in case knowledge of the other culture is minimal. Accommodating the uncertainty of cross-cultural situations and maintaining scope of mistake will help reduce anxiety. One must always be assured that the blind spot exists at both ends, and thus what should be expected by each from the other is unclear. Be vocal about what is expected in a good way to amplify communication and develop trust amongst each other. Requesting for small tips on cultural aspects can help both parties. Tolerance also plays an important role in reducing anxiety. Overcoming cross-cultural communication barriers. Cross-cultural communication stands as a process which not only identifies and addresses differences but also similarities amongst cultural groups so as to effectively engage within a given context. It is more about adjustments that individuals belonging to different cultural backgrounds make in order to improve interpersonal and intergroup communication. In order to collectively reduce all barriers to cross-cultural communication, it is best to be more patient and tolerant during all steps of communication. Approaching with an open mind, without any prejudice, helps both parties. Reiterating messages by checking if the meaning interpreted by the other person is the same as you intended will assist. Accommodating for things that do not immediately match your reference to context is essential. The most ideal act will be to pause during the complete process of communication, beginning from perception, interpretation, and evaluation, and most essentially before responding. Flexibility in thought and action are the prerequisites for success today. The same applies to communication, wherein ability and willingness to adapt is an opportunity to master cross-cultural communication. Cultural differences are on many occasions complex and create anxiety amongst individuals belonging to different cultures. Acceptance is a first step, followed by flexibility to adapt without the fear to lose your identity. There is no rule book that one can follow to get started. It is the mindset to embrace new ideas. The best strategy is awareness. Most of the cross-cultural differences can be classified as follows. First, language. The speed of language differs across different cultures. Indians tend to speak English faster since they are used to speaking their native languages at a good speed. People lay emphasis on different places in a sentence, thus hinting towards where the importance needs to be put. It could lay on important words or at the end of the sentence. The emphasis and hence the focus will have to be adjusted according to the language. This variation of focus also comes due to intonation and volume. Stronger intonations indicate intensified emotions, while louder voices are linked to dominance and arrogance. The rate at which one seeks responses or gives responses also changes as per nationalities. Western speakers would instantly respond as compared to Asian speakers who accept silence as a response. Japanese culture also has many strict norms on speaking in turn. They do not accept conversational overlap and treat it as impolite. Accents at times operate as a barrier to intercultural communication. Individuals speak the same language, for example, English, with different accents and interpretations. In this case becomes a challenge. The most apt way to overcome this barrier is to articulate clearly and speak slowly. One should also consider knowing the exact meaning of words in different languages before intermixing them. The meaning of words often changes with the situation and context in which they are being used. Care should be exercised while using words with multiple meanings. Second, written communication. The formality involved in written communication changes from culture to culture. Latin and Asian cultures are very formal in their communication, contrary to their counterparts in the UK and USA who believe in brief and efficient communication. In order to overcome this barrier, it is suggested that the format of written communication should be first understood and then executed. The style of written communication has to be learned and not assumed. Electronic communication has made the world closer and may take different forms: email, voice communication, video communication, etc. Different social media platforms require different skills to communicate. Third, listening. Both passive and active listening skills add extensive value to effective communication. This process assists in decoding messages and interpreting what is being said. The process involves receiving the message, interpreting it using a frame of reference, remembering or storing the message, evaluating the accuracy of the content, and finally responding using verbal and/or non-verbal response. In countries like Japan, China, and Finland, listening is an effective process wherein the listener maintains silence till the time the speaker finishes speaking. This is their way of active listening and helps in absorbing what the speaker is saying before responding. Silence in these cultures should not be treated as a symbol of non-attentiveness. Some listeners may tend to jump in the conversation before the speaker is able to complete his message. Fourth, non-verbal communication. This communication goes beyond words, sometimes complementing and sometimes replacing verbal communication. Non-verbal communication contributes a major portion of the message. It can take the form of gestures, facial expressions, posture, appearance, touch, distance, paralinguistic, color, or order. Gestures offer richness to communication in several cultures. Japan and China are two countries where gestures are largely restrained and not used freely. Africans and Latin Americans use gestures and facial expressions to add emotional touch to the words they use. Caution should be exercised in how these gestures are interpreted in different cultures. Posture may add to the perception people have about an individual. For instance, standing tall is seen as a sign of confidence in the Western countries but is treated as arrogance in the Eastern countries. Body language also requires to be understood with its norms. In order to interpret body language correctly, one should understand the postures, gestures, comments, or situation. The famous wobbling of the head in India has different meanings depending upon the situation in which it is performed. It could sometimes mean no, while at times it is an act of affirmation to the speaker. The direction of wobble could sometimes be teasing and sometimes authoritative. One needs to match it with the situation, movement of the eyes, and sometimes movement of hands to understand the accurate meaning of the message. Eye contact, technically called oculesics, is an essential part of non-verbal communication. Western culture promotes eye contact with listeners. Eastern culture, contrary, suggests that direct eye contact with people senior or elder to oneself is disrespectful. Similarly, smiling at strangers is a sign of happiness in the USA, but is regarded as strange and inappropriate in the Eastern cultures. Touch behavior and facial expressions vary from culture to culture. So does paraverbal communication, like voice volume, the use of silence and conversational overlap. Touching each other most often indicates personal relationships. People embrace each other during meetings in Russia, whereas Britishers prefer to avoid touching except handshakes. Firm handshakes during meetings are a sign of collaboration in most Western countries. Japanese, however, avoid body contact and prefer to bow. The extent to which they bow depends on the seniority of the person opposite them. It is often noticed that the cause of communication problems or misunderstanding which could lead to conflict occur due to cultural differences amongst individuals. Hofstede suggests that in order to overcome these cross-cultural communication barriers, it is best suited to interpret the conversation only after deep diving into the other culture. More than half the battle in building rapport across very different cultures is understanding. Observation must precede interpretation and attribution. The largest challenges are faced by businesses who, as a product of globalization, have to operate in multiple countries. The demarcated differences between cultures are faced on a daily basis. This demands development of intercultural communication skills among individuals of both cultures. Cultural differences have an impact on how we conduct our relationships. They determine, in part, how easily we can build rapport. Lean media, rich media, and social media. Media has taken various forms, thus providing different forms of communication. Lean media is media that is generally asynchronous in nature and thus sacrifices the possibility of immediate feedback and possibility of the social clues during communication. Lack of visual clues or limited verbal clues could cause ambiguity in interpretation and with no chance to counter-check the content, may lead to misunderstanding. Most popular examples of lean media include text messages, emails, bulletin boards, etc. While choosing the most effective channel for enhancing the effectiveness of a message, one must analyze the nature of the information that is required to be communicated. Lean media is most suited for messages that are routine and unambiguous. Media richness is the indicator of the impact of information on understanding within a defined time interval. Richness relates to the level of learning the communication offers. Face-to-face, telephonic, live chat sessions are media rich as compared to email. Media richness theory relates to giving managers an aid to increase effectiveness of communication. Richness of message can be evaluated using parameters like capacity to include personal focus and immediate feedback, languages used, multiple hints, etc. Messages embedded with unclear information with multiple interpretations should use rich media like face-to-face or telephonic communication. Information meant to communicate only pure facts can be conveyed using media which are low in richness like business letters, text messages, etc. Social media uses multiple online platforms. It helps in sharing and collaborating information online. Communication on these platforms is crucial since organizations, while communicating with other stakeholders, build in a virtual image and equity. Today, the younger population procures most of the information through these social media platforms. The actions and reactions have been loud since information at times is unfiltered. There is a sense of urgency for receiving responses. Social media has also created a pressure to create something. This could sometimes create information that is not required. The language used in social media has become more informal, abbreviated, unfiltered, and emotional and oozes with catchy things that make the information viral. Social media has definitely given traditional media run for its money. It offers options to brands to connect directly and personally with its audiences. Social media definitely is a powerful communication media with a huge impact in contemporary times. Summary. Culture is the inherent core values of a society promulgated through social interaction and teachings. It is acquired and collective. It has a value system and is largely stable. It operates as a differentiator between members belonging to different cultures, and it changes with context. Some societies have similar cultures, but a few are significantly different from others. The theories of culture suggest three contexts under which culture can be viewed as functionalist view, conflict view, and symbolic view. Hofstede's cultural dimension model suggests that cultures could be classified on the basis of power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance index, long versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. Edward T. Hall has classified the analysis and interpretation of how communication and interactions between the cultures under three categories: context, space, and time. Communication gets significantly impacted due to differences in culture. These cross-cultural barriers could be due to the language spoken, non-verbal communication, stereotypes, cultural bias, or anxiety. Awareness, acceptance, and adjustment are the key to overcoming barriers of cross-cultural behavior. In order to excel cross-cultural behavior caution, attention should be placed on the language, written communication, listening, and non-verbal communication, which includes body language, touch behavior, eye contact, gestures, and space. Lean media and rich media theories highlight the two different versions of communication channels. Lean media is suitable for unambiguous messages as there is a lack of immediate feedback. Rich media consists of telephonic and face-to-face communication where immediate feedback can be taken from the listener. Such rich media channels are suitable for transmitting ambiguous messages. With the emergence of social media platforms, various newer means of communication has become a rage among the younger population. Communication through social media platforms is much swifter and widely accessible. It is a beneficial tool for marketing and easy communication among people. However, this can lead to spread of fake information and at times chaos.
You are listening to audiobook by School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course code MMPC-007 Business Communication. Block 4, Unit-14, Part-2. Course Coordinator Professor Neeti Agrawal from School of Management Studies IGNOU. Voiceover by Santosh Bharati. Edited by Tarannum Jahan. Program assisted by Jagbandhu Jana. And program produced by Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.